to today's video. Today is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about a Kamala Harris landslide victory. I want to preface this video by saying that this is not an electoral prediction by any metric. This is not where I believe the state of the race is going to be. I am fully expecting that there is going to be a tweet from some conservative account screenshotting this saying that this is my election prediction. I am here to say in the very beginning that it is not. I saw this happen in 2020 and in 2022, and so I just wanted to clarify. But of course, bad faith actors are going to act the way they do moving forward. A landslide victory for Kamala Harris, first and foremost, needs to be put into the context of where we are nationally. My most recent election prediction has Kamala Harris winning, but not winning by a lot. And a landslide in today's day and age looks very similar to a Barack Obama victory rather than one of Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon's second term. Now, the 2024 electoral map is also built in a way that Kamala Harris really is never going to clear a metric like 400 electoral votes. Back in 2020, my Joe Biden landslide victory map looked something like this, with Donald Trump at just 125 electoral votes and Joe Biden at 413. Now, 413, very obviously, was very, very far out of the fray. That's not an electoral college victory that really anyone should expect for either side of the aisle at this point in time. And we've started to see that over the past 2 decades, the possibilities of a landslide have really narrowed because of polarization and states that have just become so exceptionally conservative and liberal that they're unwilling to vote for anybody, regardless of who the nominee might be. And we've seen that on full force recently, too, with approval ratings that are record low for incumbents, Republicans, like Donald Trump, who had record low approvals across battleground states and across many safe red states where the margins were roughly similar to what they were back in 2020. In 2016, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump had approval ratings that were both less than 40%, and both of them, of course, had to reach 50% in some states, and so they did. And so there isn't really as much of this idolization around nominees like there was under Ronald Reagan in 1984 that took a beast of an electoral college victory and a record high approval, and not to mention everything going in favor of Ronald Reagan. But in large, a landslide means something very different today than it meant 20 years ago. And so what we're going to be looking at is a realistic landslide victory for Kamala Harris. And it actually isn't too hard to envision that this map could be something that we see if Kamala Harris was to make a major improvement nationwide. But it isn't something that I think is going to happen because it's not the current state of the race. And we haven't had any indication that we're on track for what would be, in my eyes, a landslide victory for this election. But in order for this to happen, we would require many states to, those safe states, already be safe, some states to move over to be safe states. And so we typically start off with 183 electoral votes that we consider to be safe. Donald Trump has similar amount, but we'll be characterizing those a little bit afterwards because we're just going to finish the safe Democratic states first, 181 safe electoral votes. And so in order for this landslide to happen, again, keep in mind that this is going to be a shift, a massive, massive shift nationwide, because where Kamala Harris is today is not anywhere near a landslide. It would require states that have been Republican for very long periods of time, sometimes decades on end, to flip to be Democrat, which would be big for the Democratic Party, but not likely in where we are today. So Kamala Harris at 181, what other states will we move over to the safe column? Well, Tim Walz on the ticket, I would say Minnesota would have to be one of those states. I'm already fully expecting it to be a Minnesota Kamala Harris plus 10, 11-point victory with Tim Walz on the ticket. We're looking somewhere around the ballpark of 15, 16 points in favor of the Democrats. And so while that may seem like a 4-point shift, that's not what we're going to see on the grand scale. It's just what we might see in a state like Minnesota, because at some point you're maxing out, right? And Amy Klobuchar landslide victory looks very similar to something like that as well. A state like Colorado, which was already Biden plus 14, would easily clear that safe characterization, and states like Virginia and New Mexico, which were double-digit states in 2020, would also be moved over into the safe column. And that also isn't really too hard to see. Increased enthusiasm in Northern Virginia, bringing back Latino voters in New Mexico, combined with just swing state voters moving in favor of Kamala Harris. And again, this is a hypothetical scenario, so don't really need to justify it with current trends rather than hypothetical ones, because landslide victory, explaining that New Mexico, Colorado, Virginia, Minnesota would all have to be safe states. And I would also include the state of Maine. At large, it typically isn't a safe state for the Democrats. It was under Obama briefly. Now it's more of a likely state, 9, 10, 11-point victory for Democrats. Hillary Clinton actually only won it by 3 points. But in large, Maine would be, Maine would be a safe Democratic state. So 221 electoral votes for Democrats. From those states alone, Donald Trump still has his own safe states. Even in this landslide scenario, we're not seeing states like Idaho or Wyoming really narrow down. And even Utah, which was a 20-point victory for Trump in 2020, I don't know if Kamala Harris is really going to do that much better than Joe Biden in the state. It's a very interesting one, and I do feel like the Mormon vote really is a bit wishy-washy on Donald Trump. We're going to say right now, safe red state. That's the safest bet, for no pun intended. Nebraska, At large, Nebraska's 3rd district, absolutely going to be safe. That 1st district, though, we want to keep an eye out on. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Kansas would not be a safe state. Oklahoma would be. Arkansas, Louisiana. I'm going to hold on Missouri and Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama. These are the states that we would consider at face value to be safe Republican. Now, this isn't because these are states that aren't going to go to the Republican Party. I don't do these characterizations based on chance. I do it based on margin. And so these states would be 15 points plus for Donald Trump, but it really brings him down to just 75 electoral votes in the states that would be voting for him by massive, massive margins. And it really makes sense. When you're taking a look back at the 2020 election and you're taking a look at some of these margins, just think about it for a moment. In 2020, states like Missouri went to Trump by 15.4. Well, very reasonably, it'll drop under 15. Indiana was 16.1. Montana was 16.4. South Carolina was already under that margin. Kansas was already under that margin. Alaska was already under that margin. Mississippi was 16.5. And so I really don't think it's too far out of the fray to say these states would be likely red states. Missouri, Indiana, Mississippi, Kansas, Montana would be likely red states. But that pretty much brings us to a point, South Carolina as well. And Nebraska's first, which also in 2020 was also under 15 points. So that's not really too shocking for many people. And Nebraska at large was 19.1. I'm not really on the point where I'm going to say a landslide victory would even bring Nebraska at large to be less than 15. So here we are, 122 electoral votes for Trump, but then comes in Kamala Harris having in states that are considered to be likely blue. These are states that are pretty considerably strong for the Democratic Party. And what it means for Democrats at large is that they're at, roughly 5 to 15 points. So we have a bunch of states that we can characterize as likely blue. States like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin would have to be likely blue at this point. So that brings Democrats all the way up to 265. But we're forgetting there are far more states that can be characterized as such. States like New Hampshire would have to be likely blue. These are states that were already likely blue. It was typically coupled in with Minnesota, but right now I'd say that. Nebraska's second, which actually just had a poll out today showing Kamala Harris up 8 points. 8 points within that district. Brings Democrats already to 270 electoral votes. Now, moving beyond that, we have 146 electoral votes yet to be characterized. States like Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Iowa, Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Maine's second, Alaska. 146 electoral votes. They're not all going to go to Kamala Harris. I will say, a narrowing up of the race does require Kamala Harris to make improvements on Donald Trump's margin, but it doesn't mean that she's going to win every single state. I do think, though, we are going to find that with a landslide victory, that she gets Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, she also would move a state like Arizona very, very close to being a likely blue state. In fact, I'd say actually 5 to 6 point margin. I don't think the same would happen in a state like Georgia. I think it could happen in a state like Nevada. I think it's entirely plausible. Biden won the state by 2.4. So did Hillary Clinton. Obama won it by more twice. And so Nevada is a historically Democratic state. The polls might say otherwise, but they did in 2012. Romney was supposed to win the state. Obama was supposed to win the state by 2 points. He won by 7 in 2016. Trump was supposed to win the state in 2020. Trump was supposed to win the state. And so the polls in Nevada have a far long history of underestimating Democrats. Moving over, though, to Arizona, trends here do tell me that, Kamala Harris would do better. Brings her to 287, Donald Trump at 122. The final states here that really need to be characterized with a sense of urgency. Iowa and Ohio are the states that I really still think are going to hold out for Trump, as well as Maine's second district. I really don't see it getting much further than that for Democrats. I think that Democrats would love to win those states back. They are too far gone. And I know that might be something the Democrats are really hoping isn't the case. The Senate race is a different story. That's a different race. Sherrod Brown would easily win in a map like this one, and so would John Tester. But it would bring Trump to 146 electoral votes because they aren't going away. They're not going back in that sense, right, to the Obama era. So Ohio, Iowa, Republican states, even in a map like this one. But it does mean that Kamala Harris wins states like North Carolina and Georgia. I think that she would be able to clear that benchmark, win North Carolina by 1 to 5 points, win Georgia by 1 to 5 points. These are states that are winnable by the Democratic Party. It brings Kamala Harris to that number that they're really hoping they can get, which is 319 electoral votes. But they're not moving into the likely territory. Georgia is far too conservative. Arizona is much more flexible on that end. North Carolina, still far too conservative, and going to be at most for Kamala Harris a lean characterization. Now, the final 3 states, Alaska, Texas, and Florida. You might be wondering, why am I holding out on Alaska so much? Well, based on what we saw in 2020 is that Alaska shared a characterization similar to that of Virginia and New Mexico. And in terms of a universal swing, I think Alaska could genuinely narrow down to less than 5 points. Alaska does not like Donald Trump. It is a Republican state, and they are red through and through, but they do not like Donald Trump. and anyone associated with him. In 2022, we saw the August special election result in Mary Peltola elected to this United States House of Representatives. That was because she defeated Sarah Palin, who was endorsed by Donald Trump. She won by 3 points. 3 months later, she won by 10 points. Reason being, she was the popular Democrat. She was a Republican endorsed by Trump, and they don't like them there, which is why Kelly Tshibaka was defeated against Lisa Murkowski. Lisa Murkowski, who has not too high approvals amongst really anyone within the state. And so Alaska, I think Trump could really be in a point where it's a 4-point margin. Donald Trump wins. It's not going to be a massive victory, but it's a victory nonetheless. It brings Kamala Harris far closer in a state, especially if Mary Peltola brings her across to that close to the finish line. The final 2 states here, what do we have? Florida and Texas. These are 2 states totaling up to 70 electoral college votes. Kamala Harris, if she was to have a landslide victory, I would have to say, I agree with my 2020 characterization that Kamala Harris, in this hypothetical scenario, would win Florida by less than a point and Texas by less than a point. Not going to happen in this election. Don't say that I'm predicting that it will, because I do not believe that will be the case this cycle. But if we're talking about a universal shift, Joe Biden only lost the state of Texas by 5.6% in 2020. Mitt Romney won the state, 8 years prior by 16, 17 points. This is a state that has seen a consistent 5-6 point on average trend towards the left in the past 8 years. And so when you're talking about 2024, if that trend actually was to continue, believe it or not, Texas would be decided by less than a point this cycle. I still think it's a bit too much for Democrats to tackle. It's not being invested in the same way. They're going to spend $100 million in Michigan and $10 million in Texas, and that's the way this is going to go. But in a scenario like this one, if Kamala Harris was to see an electoral college landslide victory, the pathway would actually lie through Texas and Florida, which would be a state that Donald Trump would likely win now by 6-7 points. But in this hypothetical scenario, Kamala Harris would win. And so it brings her to 389 electoral votes. Donald Trump to 149. Democrats flip Texas, they flip Florida, and they flip North Carolina. But again, this speaks to a broader message of polarization and difficulty in Democratic and Republican landslides, because the map isn't conducive to that. The American electorate is not conducive to that. And it results in landslide victories like this one that, again, feel much more reminiscent of Obama's 2008 victory rather than that of Ronald Reagan's 1984 victory. Different scenarios, different circumstances, same America, very different voting patterns. And so finally here, 389 to 149 would be a complete and total rejection of Donald Trump. And I think the implications of this would extend beyond just Kamala Harris's mandate for victory, but that Donald Trump and his MAGA wing of the party should never, ever, ever be nominated on the presidential level again. Based on the way we've seen this real, and I hate to use this word because I really don't like to characterize voters in this way, but it is this cult of personality around Donald Trump that has exhibited so many losses for the Republican Party over the past 8 years. It is this association with a candidate who has only shown that he can win once against a uniquely unpopular Democrat and has never won once again. In 2018, lost. In 2022, lost. In 2020, lost. And now running again in 2024, and based on the metrics, and Democrats should not get complacent, but based on the metrics, he's on track for a loss today. And so it'd be interesting to see if this was actually to be the scenario. Would Nikki Haley's wing of the party rise up? Would Ron DeSantis rise up? Would other people rise up? Would J.D. Vance be politically irrelevant? I don't know, because this is not the situation we will be in. The election will be far closer than this, but a Kamala Harris landslide can really only be displayed in a map like this, 389 to 149, roughly, 200 electoral college vote victory, 240 electoral college vote victory, given Kamala Harris flips in Florida and Texas and North Carolina, likely setting Democrats up for decades of victories across these battleground states. Because the interesting thing of this all, if you were to take away all of the swing states and give Kamala Harris just Texas, she has enough electoral votes to win the election, which is something that many Democrats look at and say, maybe that should be the state that they're targeting in 2028 or 2032. And maybe they're right. And maps like this really only for that point that Texas and Florida are a little bit more interesting than we might think when it comes down to building out an electoral strategy and an electoral college victory for Democrats. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. Check out the Instagram and Twitter, and at the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.